The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, was a pivotal conflict in Cold War history, fought on the Korean Peninsula. It resulted from the division of Korea at the end of World War II, and it involved major international forces including the United States, the Soviet Union, China, and the United Nations. Here's a detailed breakdown of the war's causes, main events, and consequences. 1. Historical background, Division of Korea, Japanese occupation, 1910 to 1945. Korea was under Japanese rule from 1910 until Japan's defeat in World War II in 1945. Division at the 38th parallel, 1945. After Japan's surrender, Korea was divided into two occupation zones. The Soviet Union occupied the north, while the United States occupied the south. This division was intended to be temporary, but with the rise of the Cold War tensions, it solidified into two separate states. In the north, the Soviet-backed communist regime under Kim Il-sung was established. In the south, the US-backed anti-communist government led by Syngman Rhee was formed. Both Kim Il-sung and Syngman Rhee desired the reunification of Korea but under their respective ideologies. This set the stage for conflict. 2. Outbreak of the war, June 25, 1950. On June 25, 1950, North Korean forces, supported by the Soviet Union, crossed the 38th parallel and invaded South Korea. The invasion caught South Korea and its allies by surprise. Initial North Korean success, the well-equipped North Korean People's Army, KPA, rapidly advanced southward, capturing the capital Seoul within days and pushing South Korean and US forces to the brink of defeat. The defending forces retreated to a small perimeter around Pusan, known as the Pusan Perimeter. 3. UN intervention. The invasion prompted the United Nations to intervene, marking the first time that the UN used military force to respond to an international crisis. The UN condemned the invasion and authorized military assistance to South Korea. Led predominantly by US forces under General Douglas MacArthur, a coalition of 16 countries sent troops in aid. 4. The tide turns. Incheon landing, September 1950. One of the war's pivotal moments came when General MacArthur launched a bold amphibious assault at Incheon, far behind enemy lines, on September 15, 1950. This maneuver cut off North Korean supply lines and led to the rapid collapse of their southern offensive. Recapture of Seoul. Within weeks, Seoul was retaken by UN forces, and the North Koreans were driven back across the 38th parallel. Advance into North Korea. UN forces then crossed into North Korea, aiming to reunify the peninsula under South Korean control. They captured Pyongyang, the North Korean capital, and approached the Yalu River, the border with China. 5. Chinese intervention, October 1950. China, alarmed by the proximity of UN forces to its border, entered the war in late October 1950. Over 300,000 Chinese volunteer troops crossed into North Korea and launched a counteroffensive. Chinese offensive. The Chinese forces, using mass attacks and guerrilla tactics, pushed the UN forces back southward. Seoul fell again to communist forces in January 1951, marking a significant setback for the UN coalition. 6. Stalemate and attrition, 1951 to 1953. By the spring of 1951, the front line stabilized near the 38th parallel, roughly where the war had started. Both sides launched offensives but made little progress. The war devolved into a bloody stalemate, with heavy fighting concentrated along a fortified front. General MacArthur's dismissal. During this period, MacArthur publicly advocated for expanding the war into China and even suggested using nuclear weapons. This brought him into conflict with President Harry S. Truman, who feared that escalating the conflict could lead to World War III. MacArthur was relieved of his command in April 1951 and replaced by General Matthew Ridgway. 7. Armistice negotiations, 1951 to 1953. Peace talks began in July 1951, but they were slow and contentious. Major sticking points included the repatriation of prisoners of war and the exact location of the border. The fighting continued even as negotiations dragged on. 8. End of the war, armistice, July 27, 1953. The war finally came to an end on July 27, 1953, with the signing of the Korean Armistice Agreement. This ceasefire stopped the fighting but did not lead to a formal peace treaty. The armistice established a demilitarized zone, DMZ, along the 38th parallel, which still exists today as one of the most heavily fortified borders in the world. The creation of the Military Armistice Commission to supervise the truce. 9. Consequences of the Korean War, human toll. The war caused enormous casualties. Estimates vary, but around 2.5 million people, including civilians and soldiers, were killed. Millions more were displaced. Both North and South Korea were devastated by the fighting. Geopolitical impact. The war entrenched the division of Korea into two hostile states, a situation that persists to this day. The conflict solidified the Cold War's division between East, communist, and West, capitalist, blocs. It intensified U.S. efforts to contain communism, leading to greater U.S. involvement in Asia, particularly in Vietnam. For China, the war marked its emergence as a major player on the world stage. Its intervention was crucial to North Korea's survival and enhanced its position as a leader in the communist world. Legacy in Korea. The war left deep scars in both Koreas. North Korea became increasingly isolated and militarized under the Kim dynasty, while South Korea, after years of authoritarian rule, eventually developed into a prosperous democracy. 10. Ongoing tensions. The Korean War never officially ended, as no peace treaty was signed. Periodic flare-ups of violence, particularly along the DMZ, and ongoing nuclear tensions with North Korea are legacies of the unresolved conflict. The armistice remains fragile, and reunification, though desired by many, seems distant. Summary of key events. June 25, 1950, North Korea invades South Korea. September 15, 1950, UN forces land at Incheon, turning the tide. October 1950, China intervenes. July 1951, armistice talks begin. July 27, 1953, armistice is signed, but no peace treaty is concluded. In essence, the Korean War was not just a conflict between the two Koreas but a global clash of ideologies, marking a significant chapter in Cold War history. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel for more such content.